Good morning, it's Bryant from the 5 a.m. James. My eyes opened at 3:17 a.m. this morning, and I was very, very hungry for some of Henry James's nonfiction prose. And I came to this autobiographies volume in the Library of America series, which is just terrific, and includes, his own autobiographies, Notes of a Son and Brother, The Middle Years, etc. But there's this very, very short essay that he had written as kind of a favor to William Dean Howells, who had asked him around 1900, 1901 to tell him what the turning point in his life was. Basically, William Dean Howells said that each person's life has a vital turning point. It's not always evident when you look back, and I was going to ask maybe the booktube community if they knew what the turning point of their life was, literary or otherwise. What is that particular moment that maybe helped you realize that you were going to be a reader, a devout reader for the rest of your life? So as you can see, this is basically one paragraph. And I do want to add that Mark Twain was also asked by William Dean Howells to write an essay, and he has his own version of it floating around out there that I'm sure you can track down. I'll tell you what my turning point is as soon as I read this quick little essay from James. I figured it'd be a good Wednesday morning experience if you are on your commute or otherwise. The turning point in my life, and this was published in 1909, when a distinguished friend whose sympathy I have a pampered sense of almost inveterately enjoying, lately remarked to me that every man's life had had its turning point, and that there were cases, particular lives, as to which some account of what had turned on it, and how and why the turn had come, couldn't fail to be interesting. I glanced back at my own career in the light of this generalization, only perhaps, however, to look too blank and unrecognizing. This made the light, thanks to the source of it, glow more brightly, that is, with an even more than customary kindness. My own case and my own life were, in other words, a matter into which my friend could sufficiently enter to remind me of their having had upon a time at least the appearance of one of the momentous junctures in question, occasions of the taking of the ply that is never again to be lost, occasions of the true vocation or the right opportunity, recognized more or less in a flash, determinations in short of character and purpose, and above all, of a sharper and finer consciousness. It so happened that I had, in the deepest depths of the past, spent a year at that admirable institution, the Harvard Law School, and that, withdrawing from it prematurely, though under no precipitation that I may not now comfortably enough refer to, I brought away with me certain rolls of manuscript that were quite shamelessly not so many bundles of notes on the perusal of so many calfskin volumes. These were notes of quite another sort, small, sickly seed enough, no doubt, but to be sown and to sprout up into such flowers as they might, in a much less trimmed and ordered garden than that of the law. My friend had reason enough to remember 2 or 3 of the first literary nosegays that were to enable me to gather, boldly disposed on his own editorial table, as he was one day to find them. And he now suggested to me the inference that, since the tribute with which I was so promptly to affront him had, in principle, forced its way up through a soil that so little favored it, I must there, in the cold shade of queer little old Dane Hall, for any of you Harvard people, which I am definitely not, I wonder if Dane Hall is still sits there on campus. Okay, back to the essay. Cold shade of queer little old Dane Hall have stood at the parting of my ways, recognized the false steps, even though few enough already taken and consciously committed myself to my particular divergence. Let me say at once that I welcomed the suggestion for the kindly grace of it, the element of antique charm and bedimmed romance that it placed straight away at the disposal of my memory, by which I mean that I wondered whether I might not find on ingenious reflection that my youth had, in fact, enjoyed that amount of drama. I couldn't, I felt, be sure. But the question itself and its accompaniments appealed to me, giving me the ancient, the classic thrill known to all those who have felt the ground made firm for talking about themselves. So at any rate, seems to stand before me, wreathed with flowers, smiling opportunity, with the reminder in her eyes of the numberless men and women who, on smaller provocation, have leaped to her embrace. It is well enough to talk overflowingly of the things one had thrown off and that seemed to have ceased to be part of oneself. But real bliss of publication, I make out, must be for those one has kept in. That is, if they have at all richly accumulated and are too tightly packed to be gouged out, or, to put it more delicately, too shy or too proud to consent to be touched. So, just real quick, this is James's looking back on his ill-fated semester or two at Harvard Law School, which clearly was not for him, and he probably spent a lot of time writing his short fiction instead, and thankfully he did, because that was enough to get him addicted to the routine, and as he mentions, the real bliss of publication was also intoxicating, so thankfully he did not end up with a life in law. The turning point in my life, and I'm just going to wrap this up right now, was when I was about 15 or 16, and I saw the documentary film Crumb by Terry Zwigoff, which David Lynch had actually produced or attached his name to in some way. This was a very, very pivotal film for me because I think it certainly enlarged my sympathies for people who seem to be broken in many ways. I certainly don't advocate some of the terrible behavior of at least one of the Crumb brothers. But this documentary is about Robert Crumb, the underground cartoonist from the 60s. I guess his most famous work he did was, Mr. Natural. He had the famous tagline, keep on trucking. And, he did the artwork for one of Janis Joplin's albums. He was very much an underground celebrity, but a very strange man. But with a very rich interior life, and his comics, which are probably not appropriate for a teenager in retrospect, were very, very interesting to me, very vivid, very funny, very thoughtful, and the film came out in the early 1990s, and I didn't know it was possible that a documentary film could be such a incredible work of art. I maintain to this day that the use of music throughout Crumb is the best I have ever seen and heard in my life, especially the last 5 to 10 minutes of the film when Crumb is moving from Northern California to France, and the work of Jelly Roll Morton, piece of his called Froggy More Rag, comes on, and it's the best use of music I've ever heard in a film ever. I also wrote my college entrance essays over Crumb. This had just opened up new vistas to me. It remains representative of possibilities in art and kind of a new way of thinking about living. Certainly some of the things that Crumb has drawn over the years or said, a little bit too saucy, but that's kind of besides the point. It's really just the greater picture of of Crumb, the landscape of, you know, what it is to create art, live a life dedicated to art, and kind of being unapologetic about that. Yeah, 30 years later, Crumb has lost none of its luster for me, and this really got me into reading kind of for pleasure. So, you know, starting with Crumb comics and then moving on to things of more, I guess, acceptable shade. Have a good day.